we are going to walk through reviewing and QAing a Sourcegraph update dependency merge request. Sourcegraph is a third-party library and service that provides code intelligence for GitLab, which is really cool. Because it's a third party and they also inject some front-end code, we really want to make sure that there's no visual regressions going on and that they're parsing our page correctly. So right now there's a little bit of manual intervention just to QA this. So we're going to walk through setting up Sourcegraph locally, which most of it is just has to happen once, and then it's just really easy to start the service, and how to QA it. So here is the agenda. We're going to look at first, what do we need to have set up on our machine for us to do this, and then we're going to look up setting up Sourcegraph and then testing it out. So some prerequisites: you need to have Docker installed. I'm on a Mac, and I think I just used Brew to install it. It's really easy. You could probably run Docker version to see if you have it installed or not, and it looks like I do. So that's great. The next thing is, because of the Docker container network, for it to communicate to different hosts, it does not communicate really nicely if you just use local hosts for everything. So I found it really easy. The easiest way to alleviate some networking issues with Docker on the Mac is to set up some aliases to your network IP as opposed to localhost or 127.0.0.1. So in my etc hosts, here are the network IPs for different services that I run. For when I run GitLab locally, I have the GDK set up to use gitlab.local as my host. And what we're going to have is, when I run Sourcegraph locally, it's going to look at sourcegraph.local. So I just use all of these. I use this .local to signify I have a locally, this is a locally running service. But because it's not localhost, or I have the local IP, Docker knows to look for this in the network. And the reason I use etc host rather than just hard coding 192.168.1.11 is because sometimes I turn off my router, and then when I turn it back on, my IP's changed. And this is real easy where I can just change it in one place. You might be looking at this as, why in the world am I setting the IPv6 and the IPv4? When I did this earlier, it looks like .mac does something special with .local as the top level domain, and for some reason, to get around Mac doing something special and like making every request take 5 seconds, you have to also specify the IPv6. But that's pretty easy to get when you run like ipconfig or something. But all of this I do once. I don't have to do it every time, but that's a prerequisite. And then, yeah, just to emphasize, over in my GDK, what is it called? We have a YAML for this. It's called GDK YAML. My host name is pointing to .local. Okay, easy stuff. I need to make sure I have the branch checked out that I'm going to review. And I do. I have my Sourcegraph code host integration checked out. That's great. And I do have the GDK running. Because all this does is just bump a node modules package. I also like to be extra careful and just remove all node modules, remove my cache, and then rerun everything. So I've already done all that. So we should not have any cache issues. Now we're getting to the fun stuff. Now we need to set up Sourcegraph. So over here, the first thing I have here is we're going to create the Sourcegraph user directory. Not going to create a Sourcegraph user. We're just going to create a place to host the config and the data in my user directory for my Sourcegraph service. We can get some more insight into that if we look in this Docker script that I have. So this is a link to my .files project, and I have this little script saved off for when I want to start Sourcegraph. I just run this thing, and it publishes to this port, and it looks at my user directory in .sourcegraph config, maps it to a directory in the container, and it looks at .sourcegraph/data and maps that to a directory in the container. This way, I can restart the service, and I have persistence. It doesn't have to keep reading the files, or I have to keep configuring it over and over again. But I have persistence as I restart this service and test out future MRs. So I added a link to here, and I'll add a link on the video to this. But you just want to copy it, copy this and run it. I have it saved out, so I'm just going to go ahead and run it. Well, let's go ahead and just copy it and run it. So here I am. Oh, I haven't created the directories yet. Okay. It might create it for me, but I'm not entirely sure. So I'm going to go ahead and just create it. I'm going to create Sourcegraph, and then I'm going to create a config, and I'm going to create a data. Okay, great. Now I'm in there. Now I can run it. Oh, I haven't done it yet. All right. Let's do it. See what happens. It is initializing the internal database. So I had all this set up beforehand, but it's pretty easy to set up. So I went ahead to record this video. I killed all of it. So I'm not entirely sure of the lead time for this, but if you see me cut all of a sudden, it's because after recording this, I realized it took too long and I spliced it for watchability. Here we go. Oh man, look at that pretty ASCII art. Sourcegraph is ready. Look at this. Okay. Rather than visiting it from localhost, I'm going to visit through my Sourcegraph host that we've set up, that alias and etc hosts. And so now we're getting to the configure step. So I'm going to sourcegraph.local 7080. Well, let's do it. I'm just going to have this be the same simple username password that's in our GDK default. Create admin account. And we are in. Great. All right. Tell me I've got some critical configuration problems. Let's check that out. External URL was empty and is required. Yeah, let's check it out. If I middle clicked on this, let's see where's. Oh, look at this. The management console. The external URL to manage is a separate service used to edit critical configuration. It's like the license key authentication. All right. It's not sending me to it. There is. So I haven't done this in a little bit. Okay, let's just follow this setup, and then we'll get to. There is something we need to do in our management console. Oh, is this it? Oh, here we go. Oh, it's all right here. Your management console password has been automatically generated for you. Keep it somewhere safe and secure. It's set in the management console. This is a separate service, I think. Yes, it is. Okay, so if I go back, okay, let me go back to here. We actually exposed two ports. We exposed this port 7080 and then exposed this 2633. 2633, I think, is the management console. So let me try that one out. Let's see what happens. Oh, okay. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I can enter in a username, any, and then the password is, oh, I gotta copy my password. Okay, it's gonna be upset. All right, let me copy this cool password. All right, let's try this again. Any. Here's my cool password. Awesome. Okay. Here we go. The external URL is important. Yes. So I want this to point to http sourcegraph.local 7080, which is this thing. Great. The external, okay. That looks good to me. Let's save it. Awesome. I was a little nervous it wouldn't like this trailing comma, but I'm glad it does. Looks like there's some other stuff I could do, but I don't think I need to do it. So I think I am done with this. That's great. First, that was one step of configuration, and Sourcegraph lovingly told me what I need to do. I feel good. Let me go ahead and refresh this page. Oh, look at that. I got rid of my warning. That's awesome. All right. Now connect my code host. Add an external service. I showed you earlier I have the GDK running. Here it is. I've got it running. You notice I'm using my domain name aliases for hosting, and that's going to be important that I keep these consistent. Signing in. I don't need to sign in. That's fine. I want some GitLab projects. All right. Here we go. Let's sign in. Oh, man. All right. Anyways, I'll start copying this while it's thinking about things. There we go. We are setting our GitLab instance URL. The token, I need to give it a access token. So I'm just doing this stuff locally. So I'm gonna create an access token for root. It says it needs to have API scope. Boom. And I'll call this Sourcegraph. Oh, looks like I've done this before. And we'll say it expires, I don't know. Let's say March 1st, 2022. Come March 1st, 2022, I'm going to be really confused why this isn't working anymore. But we'll figure that out. All right. Here we go. Copying this thing. All right. I think that's the token I need. And then here's how Sourcegraph watches your projects: is you give it a query to pass to your projects. And how it's gonna ping the projects API with this query and go through it and see, hey, do we have everything in sync? And this is how it watches for any changes to projects or new projects it wants to keep track of. Looks like you can also specify specific projects, so it doesn't just use the API. I think I'm just gonna have project query archived equals no. That looks good to me. Oh, monkeys. What's wrong with you? I think I know there's an issue for this. I created it because I was running into this for this specifically. But yeah, it's not going to be work unless we can get it to query things correctly. And I think that there's a single project that's causing this 500. Let me check out the development log. And rather than vimming it, let me do this cool tailf thing. Oh, look at that. All right. Looks like... All right. And this probably has to do with my GDK is quite old and doesn't have things seeded or migrated correctly. And oh, come on. Oh, man. Too many invocations. Oh, no. Is that really why we're upset? Okay. So I need to restart the GDK with that turned off. I haven't done that in a long time. If this interests you, keep watching. If it doesn't interest you, look at the YouTube description for when I get past this part, and we will keep moving on. But let's see if I can fix this. Too many invocations error. Oh, now we're fine. All right. Well, okay. Here we go. Okay. All right, you can stop now. Okay. Let's try... Okay, looks like it's working. So maybe it was just taking a little bit of time. But let's check out repositories. Do we have anything now? Oh, we do. Look at all those lovely repositories. And look at all these projects that I've called empty project but aren't actually empty. Great, so it pulled our repositories. We have this synced up now. There's one other setting I know, and that is that we need to add, and that is cross-origin requests setting. But let's first run into that issue and then revisit this so that you can see why it's needed. But now it's time to go to the GitLab world. So let's double check that we did everything we need to do here. Start Sourcegraph, we've done that. Signed into Sourcegraph, configure Sourcegraph, connect to the GitLab instance. We haven't done this yet, but that's coming. Now we're going to configure GitLab. One other note, and this is in our documentation for this feature, when I'm doing this locally, I need to be signed in to sourcegraph.local for the whole integration to work. So if you're testing this locally and you're seeing the feature not work and you open up the console and you see some sort of authentication thing, just try opening up the sourcegraph.local host, and if you're not signed in, that would be a situation as well. Okay, here we go. I'm in the admin panel. Going to settings, going to integrations, expanding Sourcegraph. And here's where we're going to drop our Sourcegraph URL. Great. I'm enabling Sourcegraph. Great. Okay. There's two different flags for Sourcegraph. So one, if you don't even see this, you might not have the feature flag enabled. So if you need to enable the feature flag, you know what to do. Just go to your very cool Rails console. And while the Rails console's opening up, we are... Okay, here we go. So once again, if you're going here to set up Sourcegraph, you already have the service configured, and now you want to enable it in the admin settings. But you go to integrations, you don't even see this. It's probably that you don't even have the feature enabled. And so we are going to enable it right now in just a moment. Here we go. Go Rails, you got it. Oh, you're so close. Oh, Rails. Oh my goodness. Okay. Man, that took forever. So let's see. Hey, are we enabled Sourcegraph? We sure have. So if I disable it, I refresh my admin settings page, I am not even going to see Sourcegraph here. So that is what needs to happen. Have this feature enabled. Sourcegraph. Great. Great. Awesome. Here we go. All right. Got it enabled, the feature enabled, and it's enabled on the admin settings. But wait, that's not all. We also are going to enable it for our user because we made this feature opt-inable. And it takes a little bit for... Yes, okay. So if you don't even see it at the user level, it might not be that it's enabled on the admin settings. And if you have enabled this and press save changes and you still don't see it, it's because it takes, like, for some reason, like 30 seconds to a minute for the admin settings cache to kind of invalidate and for this to be loaded. But I had this previously checked that we are enabling code intelligence on code views. We are good to go. So let's open up a cool project. And my favorite project to test out with this is, I thought it was called commit. Let's just look at my projects and explore it. Yeah, oh, it's called lab code. Yeah, this one's kind of a cool one to test out. Okay, so I usually like to go to, I click T to go to finding the file. I see some sort of Kotlin file. Let's do something like diff. That sounds interesting, and like it would have references to different classes, or not. Yeah, this is probably not a great one, but maybe we can check out what parse syllable. No, this is going to be totally different. This is not a great example. All right, let's try it again. Let's look for a copy. App, I think app would have one. What we're looking for is something that is actually helpful for me to find references for. Like here, where I have a thing called event bus, or getting the default, and oh yeah, we have like GitLab. Awesome. Now, let's open up the console, and we're gonna see some errors. Yes. I started reaching out to our Sourcegraph local instance, but it failed because Sourcegraph, this instance, is not allowing this cross-origin request. And that's what I'm describing when I say, hey, we need to actually configure cores. I don't remember what it's called. I might be able to just start typing. Oh, there we go. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I think I can do Git. I think I just do like GitLab local. String does not match. Oh, it wants to the actual. Okay, it might need the port too, but let's see what happens with this. Okay. So what I did is I went to configuration and I added cores origin for GitLab local. Great. Now let's refresh this and we should see it's not happy still. Let's double check that we are getting the cores origin response back. It probably needs the port, and that's fine. I guess. I don't really know. It probably needs the port. Before I deleted all my settings, I probably should have written down what I had so that we weren't doing some experimentation on the fly, but we're all learning now. Yep, it needed the port. So now I don't see any errors. I see some cool logs like code view added. Oh, this is awesome. And look, I click on this thing. Look. Oh, it's beautiful. It's telling me some description of that class, where it's defined. Look at this. When I highlight go to definition, man, it is pointing to a GitLab URL. There is an existing bug and there's an issue for this. When I host this locally, you notice if I click on this, it's going to take me nowhere. And that's because, unfortunately, that URL ignores our port and protocol. But hopefully not for long. Sourcegraph team is pretty responsive on these issues, and I'm sure is looking into it. But there we go. And see, it would have taken me on .com. It would have nicely taken me to where this is defined. It's exciting. If I highlight over this and I see find references, since we don't really have a GitLab UI view for this, I'm expecting it to take me to Sourcegraph local when I click on this. And I'm now in the Sourcegraph UI looking at all the references to this GitLab class. Very cool. So these are working as I'd expect. This looks like they added an info button to send me to some docs on Sourcegraph, which is cool. I expect this X to work. So I think we just inadvertently tested out one of the use cases I like to check when we do these kind of things. Okay, we got a lot of stuff going on. Let me exit this. Let me clear this up. All right. So we were just checking out things from a blob, and that seemed to work. But now let's check things out from a commit level. So if I go to fix loading of project avatars and remove save and edit file options. So almost anywhere there's a code view, we'd expect Sourcegraph to give us some helpful information. So like here's one. Like I should be able to click on yeah. Sweet. Go to definition. It's going to take me to as we saw earlier, we expect this right now. We know this isn't going to work locally because it doesn't respect the port and protocol. But if I simply replace that, yep, it should take me to there. And it's on the blob of the right commit to, I believe, which is cool. Great, so this seems to be working Yep, I don't see any funkiness. You kind of see there's some UI quirks of like if I scroll this, you see how it kind of hovers it, but they've added some nice performant watchers that will delete it if it starts to that kind of deletes it smartly. So that's all doing, and that's kind of what I'm looking for when I test this out. I'm looking for some visual UI stuff. So it looks like when I resize my window, there's kind of a bug there. I don't think we've necessarily noticed that before. And I might create an issue on that. But let's check out a merge request now. And hopefully, I think these are the huge merge requests. Let's see. Hopefully we can find a good one. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be fair for me to try it out on a 681 file change merge request. So let's try it on a different one. Maybe I have a cool JavaScript one. Something tells me this isn't a good one either. So another thing, if you're doing this and you see that it's not working or it's not finding anything, you may want to go back to here and double check that. Where's like my home? I'm not really sure where my home is. Anyways, where I had like that list of repositories, you may want to double check that. Oh yeah, if I go to like settings. Nope, that's my user. Site admin? Yeah. Repositories. Yes. Yes. You may want to just double check that we actually found it. And for some reason, based on our query, or if it like GitLab is returning an error on the API, that may not be existing yet. But that's fine. Let's see if this is a helpful merge request change. This is not. I'm not going to be able to test anything intelligently with this. So let's try on a JavaScript project. I think this is a JavaScript project. What is this? I'm not even sure what this is. All right. No, that's not a helpful one either. All right, I'm going back to my projects. Node.js Express test. That might be a helpful one. It looks like GitLab Shell has a handful of merge requests. That might be helpful too. Let's check out GitLab Shell first, because those are going to be way more interesting than anything that I've come up with. This looks like it has some code to it, because there's a pipeline exclamation mark. So let's see. Hopefully it's not ridiculous. 235 changes. That's a little ridiculous. I'm curious what will happen though. Let's just see. Oh gosh. Oh no. Oh man. We're spinning. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't think this is gonna work out. Yeah. It's doing our oh look, Sourcegraph is doing stuff. Oh, we are going. We're having a hard time figuring out loading some of these views. Come on, oh, here's a Go file. All right. Oh man, looks like it's kind of working here. This huge MR. Oh man. It went away. So it's expected to work in merge requests, and it does work. This is an extreme example, so there might be some extreme behavior. Let's maybe click on this one. Oh, look, that one's kind of working. Okay, great. All right. So yeah, so some things I'm looking for is just UI bugs, really, because these things are pretty... oh, look, it's going to link to the line in my merge request when I click go to definition here. Oh, which happens to be that. Very cool. If I do find references, it's going to link me to Sourcegraph thing, which I expect. I should be able to press X. That's awesome. I'm scrolling up, And yep, it's kind of hiding itself, which is great. I wonder what happens if I open it. So I'm clicking on it to open it. You can also kind of hover over it, but click on it, persist it. If I hide my browser, yeah, it's not keeping the it's not keeping its position when the code size view changes. So that is an issue that I'll open up. If I switch tabs, does it hide itself? Let's see. Oh, it's gone. That's great. Awesome. And so is my place. Cool. Oh yeah, here's another good one. Run gitly command. Oh, look at this with all the information. So cool. So yeah, it looks like this is good to go, and I'm gonna merge this merge request because I don't see any significant issues that come up. Some things that have come up is like if I highlight over this, the X is humongous because there's some sort of CSS conflict. And also, like if I switch tabs, this stays around. So anything that's going to be jarring to the user or a bad user experience, we're going to want to fix it. This is wrapped in a feature flag. We expect there to be some issues while we're working out kinks, especially because this is a cross-organization collaboration. But you can do a quick issue search for issues with Sourcegraph to see if a known issue already exists and if we need to ping their team. But that's about it. Cool. Well, thanks for watching. I'm going to double check that we went through everything, and we sure did. So let's close out Sourcegraph, hitting Control-C. And very cool, you'll see if I start it again, I won't have to do all that configuration and stuff. But we are good to go. Thanks for watching. I'm going to stop recording now.